The sound of breaking the wagon wheel cracked on day 3. The sound was sharp, final like a gunshot echoing across empty prairie. Then silence. The kind of silence that made you count your heartbeats and wonder how many you had left. I sat down beside the broken wheel and assessed without panic. I'd learned years ago that tears don't fix wheels, and prayers don't summon help. What mattered was what I had and how far I could walk. Food for 4 days if I rationed. Water for 2, maybe 3. The closest settlement was 2 days back. Forward was unknown distance to anywhere. The broken wheel reminded me of other broken things. My late husband's coffin, the life we'd built, my belief that anything lasted. James had fixed a wheel like this once, his capable hands turning wood and iron into something that could carry us. I shook the memory off. The dead couldn't help the living. I took inventory of what I could carry. Bedroll, canteen, small pack with bread, jerky, a change of clothes, my knife? Always. The rest would stay with the wagon furniture, dishes. The wedding quilt I couldn't bear to leave behind, but couldn't carry either. Some things you carry, some things you leave behind. I was learning which was which. At dawn the next day, I started walking. The prairie stretched endlessly in all directions, beautiful in its indifference. Grass rippled like water under wind. Sky pressed down blue and vast. No shade, no shelter. Just me and the miles and the sun climbing higher. I wondered when I'd stopped believing in luck. Probably the same day I stopped believing in permanence. The day James died of fever, while I held his hand and begged God for mercy that never came. 3 years ago now, long enough that the wound had scarred over. Not long enough that I'd stopped checking it to make sure the prairie doesn't care if you're tired. It just watches you decide whether to stand or stay down. I stood. I walked. First day, second day, third day, heat baked my neck. Dust coated my throat. My feet ached with every step, the weight of my pack shifting and pulling. At night, I heard coyotes in the distance, their cries lonelier than my own silence. I slept with the knife in my hand. By dusk on the third day, I saw the ranch. Buildings clustered against foothills like they were trying to hide. Barn, house, corrals. Signs of life, but quiet life, solitary life. I approached slowly, staying visible on the open ground. Lone women who rushed into things didn't live to regret it. My heart beat faster as I got closer. Hope. That dangerous thing. Flickering to life despite my best efforts to smother it. Maybe they'd have water. Maybe shelter for a night. Maybe kindness. Maybe it was all I had left. The man who didn't speak. I stopped 50 yards from the fence line and called out, "Hello, the house." No answer. I waited, hands visible, pack on the ground beside me, making myself small. Non-threatening. A woman alone learned these things, or didn't survive them. The barn door opened. A man stepped out. Tall, weathered like the land itself, hands scarred from work. He watched me approach, and I watched him back. His eyes assessed me the way you'd assess a horse at market, not threatening, just cataloging. Size, threat level, probable intention. "I need help," I said when I reached the fence. Didn't cross it without permission. My wagon broke 3 days back. I've been walking. Can I stay just a few days? I'll work for shelter. The silence stretched between us. His eyes were the color of winter sky gray. Distant. unused to focusing on another person. Like he'd forgotten how. Finally. He pointed to the barn, nodded once. That was all. I picked up my pack and walked toward the barn, passing close enough to see details. The corrals were well maintained. The house was small but solid. One lamp burned in a window, and through it I glimpsed one plate on a table. Single life. Carefully managed. The animals in the corral were fat and healthy. He cared better for them than for himself. I suspected. The barn was clean, dry, bigger than my old house. I made a bed in an empty stall, spreading my bedroll over fresh hay. The smell was familiar, comforting. Horses and leather and work. James had smelled like this when he came in from the corrals. I heard the man cross the yard at full dark. Single set of footsteps, heavy boots, deliberate pace. He went into the house and the door closed. I counted those footsteps without meaning to. The way you count heartbeats when you're afraid they might stop. I knew what happened to women who trusted too quickly in isolated places. I'd heard the stories at every stop along the trail. Women who'd gone missing. Women who'd made the wrong choice about the wrong man. I'd lived those stories if I was stupid. But his silence wasn't hostile. It was rusty, like a gate that hadn't been opened in years. Still, I didn't sleep deeply that first night. I kept the knife close and one ear tuned to the house. At dawn, I woke to find a blanket draped over the stall rail. Wool, rough, warm. He was already working in the corral when I emerged. And he didn't look my way. Small kindness with maximum distance. I understood that language. I folded the blanket carefully and set it back where he could retrieve it. Establishing boundaries through objects when words were too much. By the third night, something shifted. I stopped counting his footsteps to make sure he stayed in the house. Started counting them just to know he was there. The agreement. We made day 4. I woke to find him already working, the sun barely up. I assessed what needed fixing around the place, a gift I'd learned from necessity. Broken hinge on the barn door, fence rail split and sagging, gap in the roof that would let rain through come spring. I found tools in the barn and started with the hinge, while he was outside with the cattle. I slipped into the house, used his kitchen, made coffee strong the way my father had taught me, left his cup on the stove and took mine back to the barn. When I returned an hour later, his cup was empty, rinsed, set aside. No words exchanged. But the message was clear. He'd accepted it. By evening of day 6, I'd finished the fence rail. He found me putting away the tools, looked at the work, then at me. Really looked at me for the first time since I'd arrived. "You can stay," he said. First full sentence. His voice was rough with disuse. "A week. I'll earn my keep," I answered. He nodded and walked away. That was our negotiation. That was our deal. We developed an unspoken system over the next few days. He worked with the cattle and horses, managing the big animals and the endless labor they required. I handled smaller repairs and maintenance, fixing what was broken, mending what was torn. We circled each other like cautious planets, paths crossing but never quite touching. Meals were separate. I cooked for myself in the barn, using his kitchen only when he was outside. Once I made bread and left half for him, wrapped in cloth on the table. The next day, I found a jar of cherry preserves beside my bedroll. Summer sweetness preserved through winter cold. His kindnesses accumulated slowly. A better blanket appeared. Extra firewood stacked near my stall. A bent nail straightened and left where I'd need it. Never given directly. Always left. I responded in kind, his torn shirt mended, and returned to his chair. Coffee ready when he came in from morning chores. The gap in the roof patched while he was out with the herd. I wondered what had happened to make a man choose this kind of alone. What hurt enough that silence felt safer than company? But I didn't ask. Some questions were invasions, and we were both defending borders we'd drawn around our wounded places. We were learning to read each other without words. His gestures, my responses. Like a language, only we spoke. Built from necessity and the slow accumulation of small trusts. A week was already feeling too short. Day 6 arrived with morning frost that made my breath visible in the barn. I woke shivering, the cold seeping through blankets and bedroll and into my bones. From the barn door, I watched him struggle with a mare in the corral. She was favoring her left foreleg. Wouldn't put weight on it. He was trying to examine it, but she kept pulling away, frightened and hurting. I knew horses. James had taught me I could help. This was the moment. I could keep my distance, or I could close it. Safety or risk. I chose risk. When she offered to help, I walked to the corral, hands visible, moving slowly so I wouldn't spook the mare. He looked up as I approached, surprise clear on his face. First time I'd come to him instead of waiting for an unspoken invitation. I can help, I said. If you let me. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded and opened the gate. The mare was trembling, eyes rolling white. I approached her at an angle, speaking low and steady. Easy now. Easy, girl. Nobody's going to hurt you. I ran my hands down her neck, her shoulder, taking my time. Let her know my touch before I reached the injured leg. When I finally examined it, I found swelling and heat just above the fetlock. Not broken, but badly strained. Need to wrap it, I said. Cold water first, then liniment if you have it. He brought what I asked for without question. We worked together. I held the mare steady and talked to her while he followed my instructions. His hands were gentler than I'd expected for such a solitary man. Careful. Deliberate. Listening when I told him to ease up or press harder. When we finished, the mare was calm, standing quiet with her weight off the injured leg. He and I stood together by the corral fence, breathing hard from the effort, the morning sun warming us. You know horses, he said. Statement, not question. My husband bred them, long time ago. First personal information I'd shared. The words hung in the cold air between us. He looked at me, really looked, and I saw the question forming. But he didn't ask, just nodded, respecting the boundary even as I cracked it open. I'm John, he said. Sarah. We stood there another moment, the mare peaceful behind us. Our breath-forming clouds that mingled and disappeared. Something had shifted. Something had begun. That evening, I made my offer. We were standing by the corral again, watching the mare test her leg. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and orange. My moment of courage, carefully chosen. I'll stay through winter, I said. Didn't look at him. Kept my eyes on the horizon. Help with the animals, the repairs, whatever you need. But I can't stay in that barn. John. I'll freeze out there. I need to be in the house. The pause was so long I thought I'd miscalculated. Asked for too much. Too soon. I braced for rejection, already planning my departure at dawn. There's a room, he finally said. Back corner. Small. You'd have privacy. Relief flooded through me. But I kept it off my face. Kept my voice steady. That's fair. You're sure about winter, that's months. I'm sure. He nodded. All right then. I moved my things that same evening. The small pack that held everything I owned now. The room was narrow, with a single window and a bed and nothing else. But it was warm. It was shelter. It was more than I'd hoped for when my wagon wheel cracked 3 days into my journey. I noted the lock on the inside of the door. Noted that he'd pointed it out without making it awkward. In case you need it. He'd said just that. Respect, built into wood and iron. We established household rhythms quickly. I cooked. He provided meat and supplies from town. I cleaned. He maintained the structures. We split the animal care between us, learning each other's methods, adapting to work together. Still mostly silent, but the silence became comfortable, companionable, even like we were two instruments learning to harmonize. The first meal we ate at the same table. I served stew and he sat down across from me without discussion. We ate in silence, but it wasn't the silence of strangers anymore. It was the silence of people who'd earned the right to not fill space with unnecessary words. When I went to bed that night, I lay awake listening to him move in his room, not counting footsteps for safety anymore, counting them for something else, something I wasn't ready to name. The rhythm we'd built felt natural, inevitable, like we'd been doing this for years instead of days. I told myself it was just winter, just survival, just two people helping each other through cold months. I was lying. The night we talked by firelight weeks passed and snow came. We worked side by side more often, feeding cattle, checking fences, breaking ice on water troughs. The work was endless and necessary, and we divided it without discussion. He'd start a task. I'd join him. I'd begin something. He'd appear to help. Evenings we spent by the fire. He carved wood small animals, intricate and beautiful. I mended clothes or read from the few books he had. Sometimes we talked about practical things. Weather, cattle, supplies needed from town. His voice was rusty from years of disuse, but I found I liked the sound of it. Low and careful, like he was rationing words the way you rationed food in lean times. Then came the anniversary, 3 years since James died. I woke knowing the date, feeling the weight of it settle over me like the blanket I'd slept under. I moved through morning chores mechanically, mind elsewhere, in the past. In the room where I'd held his hand and felt the fever burn through him. In the helplessness of watching someone you love slip away and being unable to stop it, John noticed. Of course he noticed. "You all right?" he asked at midday. I almost lied. Almost said I was fine. But something about his tone, genuine concern, no prying, made me tell the truth. 3 years today, I said, since my husband died. He didn't offer empty condolences, didn't say he was sorry, or that time heals, or any of the useless things people say. Just nodded, accepting the information. That evening, we sat by the fire as usual. But instead of carving, John set his wood aside and looked at me. "My wife left," he said, 10 years back. Said the isolation made her crazy. Said she'd rather be alone in a city than alone with me in the middle of nowhere. Understanding passed between us. Different losses. But the same loneliness. The same careful rebuilding of walls around hearts that had been broken. I didn't mean to drive her away, he continued. Didn't know how to be what she needed. By the time I figured it out, she was gone. I didn't mean to survive him, I said. Felt like betrayal for weeks, months, that I kept breathing when he couldn't. We sat in shared grief, the fire crackling between us. Then John asked about James, about the horses we'd bred, the life we'd built, and I talked. First time in 3 years I'd talked about him without the words catching in my throat. I remembered good things, the way James laughed, his patience with young horses, the coffee he made that tasted like burnt dirt, but I drank anyway because he made it for me. John listened without interrupting, asked real questions, seemed to genuinely want to know. He sounds like he was a good man. John said when I finished, he was... You loved him. I did. Still do. I thought about that. Always, but not the same way anymore. He's memory now. Sweeter for being memory. Maybe doesn't hurt as much to remember. John nodded. That's honest. We sat closer than usual on the bench, our arms almost touching. The fire cast shadows across his face, softening the harsh lines. I noticed the gray at his temples, the way he tilted his head when he listened, the rare smile that changed his whole face. I noticed, and the noticing terrified me. It was the first time since losing James that remembering didn't only hurt. John had given me the space to love what I'd lost without drowning in it. But opening my heart even a crack meant risk, meant vulnerability, meant the possibility of loss all over again. When I went to my room that night, I lay awake for hours, not from fear, from hope, which was infinitely more dangerous. When the storm hit, the blizzard came without warning. One moment, the sky was clear. The next, the world went white. Wind screamed. Snow drove horizontal. Visibility dropped to nothing. The cattle scattered, panicking. Horses threw themselves against corral fences. The barn door tore loose and slammed against the wall hard enough to crack wood. No time for fear. No time for hesitation. John and I moved as one unit, desperate to save what we could. The roan. I shouted over the wind. I see her. He was already moving, catching her halter. Left side the steers. Got it. We worked through the night in pure survival mode, herding cattle into the barn, calming horses, securing anything that could blow away or break. I saved a calf from freezing. He pulled me back from a shed as the roof started to collapse, his arm around my waist, my heart hammering from how close I'd come. Our eyes met over the calf's shivering body. Real fear for each other, not just fear of the storm. Stay close, he said. I nodded. We did. We stayed close, moving together through the white hell, partners in crisis. In the chaos, we functioned like we'd worked together for decades. I'd call directions. He'd follow. He'd start a task. I'd finish it. We were two parts of a whole, and it felt right in a way that should have terrified me but didn't. The storm broke at dawn. We collapsed inside the house, soaked through, half frozen, muscles screaming from hours of work. I couldn't stop shaking. John wrapped a blanket around both our shoulders. And we sat together by the fire we'd built with trembling hands. Physical closeness we hadn't allowed before. His warmth against my side. my shoulder pressed to his chest. Too exhausted to maintain distance. Coffee? He made it while I sat, huddled in the blanket. When he handed me the cup, our fingers touched, and I felt the touch everywhere. "We're a good team," he said quietly. "Yeah, could be permanent." The words hung between us. I felt my walls slam back into place, panic rising. This was too much, too fast, too real. If I let myself want him, I'd be opening myself up to loss again. And I'd barely survived it the first time. "John, I can't do this alone anymore," he interrupted, looking right at me. "Didn't realize how much I hated it until you came." The silence, the isolation. I thought I wanted it, but I was wrong. My heart clenched with love and terror, both fighting for dominance. I wanted to say, "I'll stay. I want to stay. I'm falling in love with you." But terror won. "I'm not staying past spring," I said. His expression shut down, hurt, then carefully neutral, protecting himself. "Right. I know." Immediate regret flooded me. I saw what I'd done, pushed him away to protect myself. Built a wall to keep my heart safe and locked both of us outside it. But I didn't take the words back. Couldn't. Fear had a grip on me too tight to break. The next 2 weeks were the worst. We were careful with each other, polite, distant. The house that had felt like home became a trap I'd built myself. He was protecting himself now, and I'd taught him how I was miserable. He was withdrawn. The easy partnership we'd built crumbled under the weight of my cowardice. And somewhere in that cold, careful silence, I realized something terrible. I'd already lost him. The thing I'd been so afraid of had happened anyway. Not because he died or left, but because I'd chosen fear over courage. I'd lost him by refusing to risk having him the night I tried to leave. I couldn't bear it anymore. The tension, the careful distance, his hurt that he tried to hide, but I saw anyway. My own cowardice staring me in the face every time I looked at him. I decided to leave. Better a clean break than this slow death of possibility. Middle of the night. I gathered my few things, the pack I'd arrived with, the shirt I'd mended for him that still smelled like soap and leather, the book he'd lent me with his handwriting in the margins, the coffee cup that had somehow become mine. Each item was a memory. Each memory was a knife. I cried as I packed first tears in 3 years. Silent tears that I wiped away angry, hating myself for the weakness. I was halfway done when I heard footsteps. Looked up to find John in the doorway, fully dressed like he hadn't been sleeping either. "You're leaving?" he said. Not a question. I tried to lie, tried to make it sound reasonable. "My wagon's fixed. It's time. I've imposed long enough." "You're running." "I'm not. You're scared." His voice was quiet, but certain. "And you're running." My anger flared, defensive. "You don't know me." He stepped into the room. His eyes held mine, and I couldn't look away. "I know you hum when you cook," he said. "Old hymns, mostly. I know you check the barn 3 times before bed, making sure everything's secure. I know you still wear your wedding ring on a chain under your shirt. I know you bite your lip when you're thinking hard about something. I know you're terrified to be happy again." The tears came harder. I couldn't stop them. I can't lose someone again, I whispered. I barely survived it the first time. If I let myself love you and you leave or die or just wake up one day and decide I'm not enough, I can't do it. John, I can't. He moved closer, put his hands on my shoulders, steady and warm. What if we get years? He asked. What if we get happy? What if you are enough? And I am. And we stop punishing ourselves for being alive. I shook my head. But the words were breaking through my defenses like water through a dam. I'm not asking you to survive, Sarah. He continued. I'm asking you to live. The dam broke. I cried like I hadn't cried since James died. Cried for everything for James and the life we'd lost. For the years I'd wasted being afraid. For this man standing in front of me, asking me to be brave when I'd forgotten how. John pulled me against his chest and let me cry. Didn't try to fix it or stop it. Just held me while I broke open. When I could speak again. I said, I'm afraid. Me too. What if it doesn't work? What if it does? I don't know how to do this again. Neither do I. His voice was steady against my hair. We'll figure it out. Together. If you'll stay. I pulled back to look at him. His eyes were steady on mine. No walls, no protection. Just honesty and hope. And the same fear I felt reflected back at me. I don't want to leave, I said. Then don't. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. Could it be just a choice? Just saying yes to the risk, because the alternative walking away from this, from him, was worse than any loss I could imagine. Stay, Sarah, he said quietly. Please, just stay. I thought about the wagon wheel that had broken 3 days into my journey. Thought about the 3 days I'd walked to reach this ranch. Thought about the barn and the fear and the slow building of trust. Thought about the mare's leg in the storm and the coffee cups side by side. Thought about how fear had kept me alive after James died, but it was also killing me. Slowly. Surely. All right, I whispered. All right. I'll stay. We sat together until dawn. Didn't talk much. Just held hands and breathed and existed in the same space without fear between us. When light came through the window, I unpacked, slowly, deliberately. Each item put away a small act of courage. It wasn't a promise yet. Not quite. But it was the beginning of one. The first day of the rest of my life. And for the first time in 3 years, I wanted there to be a rest of my life. I wanted it with him. The choice I made. Spring arrived like a gift. Snow melted, revealing earth again. Roads cleared. Wagon ruts dried firm enough to travel. Everything that had trapped me here through winter was gone. My wagon sat in the barn, fully repaired. John had fixed it weeks ago. Methodically, never mentioning it. The wheel that had broken was new, strong, tested. I could leave tomorrow if I wanted. John didn't mention it either, but tension hovered between us like a question neither of us wanted to ask. We'd grown close again since the night I'd almost left. But we'd been careful, testing, making sure we were both certain before we built something that would hurt worse to lose. I woke one morning and knew, not fear, just knowing. Deep certainty that settled into my bones and stayed there. I wanted this. Him. This life. Wanted it actively, deliberately, with full knowledge of the risk. I had to tell him. Evening came. We'd finished chores, eaten dinner, sat together by the fire like we did every night now. His hand was close to mine on the bench, not quite touching, asking permission. I took his hand and felt his surprise, his careful hope. "John," I said, "I need to tell you something." He tensed slightly, bracing. I'd hurt him before. He remembered. "I want to stay," I said, looked right at him so he'd see the truth in my eyes. "Not until summer. Not for a season. Stay. Permanently. Build a life here. With you. If you'll have me." The silence stretched. His expression was unreadable. "You sure?" he finally asked. "Last chance to run. Sarah." I smiled. "I spent 3 years surviving. I want to live now. Here. With you." His answering smile transformed his face, made him look years younger. The weight of loneliness lifted. "Then live here. With me?" We talked logistics then, because we were practical people who'd both learned that love needed foundation as much as feeling. We'd expand the house, add a room, maybe 2. Start breeding horses again, the way James had taught me. Plant a real garden, not just vegetables, but flowers. Make plans, build future. "We're not young," I said. "We're not foolish. We know how this could hurt." "We do." He agreed. "We're choosing it anyway." "That's courage," I said. "Or stupidity." "Both. Probably." He pulled me closer. "Worth it, either way." We made plans late into the night. Practical plans. Beautiful plans. A life built from shared work and shared hope. Equal partnership. Chosen family. When we finally stopped talking, he looked at me in the firelight and said, "What made you decide?" I thought about it. "About my wagon wheel breaking. About 3 days of walking that brought me here. About the barn and the fear and the slow building of trust. About almost leaving and choosing to stay." I realized I'd already lost everything I was afraid of losing. I said, "By not choosing you, I'd lost you. And myself seemed stupid to keep choosing fear when courage was right in front of me." "That's practical," he said. "I'm a practical woman." I noticed. "Did you notice I love you?" The words hung between us. First time either of us had said it. John's hand tightened on mine. "I was hoping," he said quietly. "Hope confirmed." He kissed me then. First real kiss. Tentative and then sure. Like coming home to a place I'd never been, but somehow always known. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "I love you too," he said. In case that wasn't clear, we moved into his room. Our room that night made it ours together. Physical intimacy that felt earned, chosen, right. I won't detail it because some things are private. Between 2 people who've fought their way to each other through fear and grief. But it was good. Better than good. It was everything I'd thought I'd lost forever. The next morning, I planted seeds in the garden. Literal and metaphorical new growth. John carved my name into the doorframe beside his. letters that would weather with the house. Permanent and choosing to be permanent. I moved my wedding ring from the hidden chain to my open hand. Not on my finger that was still James's place, but visible, honored, past and present, both acknowledged. John noticed and understood, without me explaining. He was part of making you who you are. John said, I'm grateful to him. That's when I knew for certain I'd made the right choice. A man who could honor my past while building my future. Who understood that love doesn't erase love, just adds to it. We married quietly in town 3 weeks later. Nothing fancy, just legal and real and chosen. The preacher asked if I took this man, and I said I do, without hesitation. Meant it with everything I had. We rode home together, and I thought this is what happiness feels like. Not absence of fear, presence of choice, presence of love actively given and received. That night, lying beside him in the dark, I whispered, I'm glad my wagon wheel broke. He laughed. First time I'd heard him really laugh, full and genuine. Me too, he said. Best thing that never went according to plan. And it was the life we built 2 years later. The ranch thrived. We'd expanded the herd, added horses to breed and train. The house was bigger now, with rooms we'd built together from lumber and love and stubborn determination. My touches were everywhere, curtains in windows, flowers in the garden, warmth in walls that had been cold for too long. Mornings we woke together, made coffee, planned the day. Equal partners in everything. He'd suggest. I'd counter-suggest. We'd compromise. The give and take of partnership, the dance of two people who'd learned each other's steps. We worked side by side, feeding animals, mending fences, training young horses. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we worked in comfortable silence. Both were good. Both were ours. Evenings by the fire. He still carved wood. I still mended clothes or read. But now we sat close, touching casually, his hand on my shoulder, my head against his chest. Small intimacies that added up to safety, to home, to chosen love. We helped neighbors, and neighbors helped us. I was Mrs. Sarah now, accepted into the community I'd arrived in as a desperate stranger. We hosted gatherings sometimes, the house full of voices and laughter. Life was full, rich, everything I'd thought I'd lost forever. Then one evening, a traveler appeared at the ranch. Young woman, wary eyes, wagon with a broken wheel. I saw myself in her, the fear, the desperate hope, the careful assessment of risk. John and I offered shelter without hesitation. Food, warmth, safety. The back room that had been mine was now hers, for as long as she needed. That night, after she'd fallen asleep, I stood on the porch with John's arm around me, watched the sunset paint the sky in colors that looked like hope. Happy. He asked. I thought about it, really thought about James and the life I'd lost, about the wagon wheel and the 3 days walking, about the barn and the fear and the almost leaving, about the choice I'd made to stay, to live, to love again. Yes, I said, and meant it, completely happy. He pulled me closer, and I leaned into him, watching the colors fade into twilight, Two people who'd learned that endings can become beginnings, that broken can become whole. That alone can become together. I thought about the lessons I'd learned, lessons I'd tried to teach that young woman in the back room, through small kindnesses and quiet example. Shared work builds intimacy deeper than words ever could. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for what you need. Isolation feels safer than vulnerability, but connection heals what loneliness cannot. You don't survive your way into living. You choose your way into it. The traveler would leave eventually, her wagon repaired, her journey continued. But maybe she'd carry something with her. The knowledge that broken things could be fixed. That kindness existed. That people could help each other through hard times and expect nothing in return except the chance to pass. That kindness forward someday. I'd been that traveler once. Broken wagon, broken heart, broken faith in anything good. And 2 years later, I stood on the porch of a home I'd helped build, in the arms of a man I'd chosen to love, looking at a life I'd actively created from courage and risk and the simple decision to stay. "We should check on her tomorrow," I said. "Make sure she has everything she needs." "We will," John said. "You're good at that. Knowing what people need." I learned from experience. Best teacher. The last light faded. Stars began to appear, one by one, filling the sky with points of light against darkness. John and I stood together, watching them emerge, and I thought about how that was life. Really. Darkness and light, both. Loss and love, both. Fear and courage, both. You couldn't have one without the other. But you could choose which one to give more weight to, which one to follow. I'd spent 3 years following fear, 2 years following love. The difference was everything. "John," I said quietly. "Yeah, thank you." "For what?" "For being patient. For waiting while I figured out how to be brave. For asking me to stay when I was ready to run." He kissed the top of my head. "You would have figured it out eventually. You're strong like that." "Maybe. But you helped." We stood together in the darkness. Two people who'd found each other through broken wagon wheels and blizzards and the slow building of trust. Tomorrow we'd wake up and do the work again. Feed animals, mend fences, plant seeds. Build the life we'd chosen one day at a time. But tonight, we just stood together and breathed and were grateful. The wagon wheel that shattered on that dusty road had brought me here to this man, this land, this life. I'd walk those 3 days again in a heartbeat, because every step was leading me home. Some things break so other things can be built. Some endings are beginnings in disguise. Some journeys take you exactly where you need to be, even if you didn't know you needed to be there. I hadn't known I needed this ranch, this man, this second chance at life and love. But the broken wheel had known. The 3 days of walking had known. The prairie that watched me decide whether to stand or stay down had known, and now I knew too. All it takes is a little courage, and maybe a broken wagon wheel, and the willingness to stay when every instinct tells you to run, to choose vulnerability over safety, to risk your heart one more time even when you're terrified of losing it. I'd made that choice, and standing here now, 2 years into the life we'd built together, I'd make it again. Every single time, I'd make it again.